All right.
Hey, everybody. All right. So
Hey.
we're waiting on Bill to pop in. And
Yeah,
so
Pete, I am not Bill
yeah.
Thompson, but this is the Break It Down show.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
All right.
Yeah. All right. So I thought you and I would just start a little bit because Bill has got a program that he's built out, an app for hunters, which is great. And I'm always fascinated by the use of technology. And oh, here comes Bill right now. We'll just let Bill come on in and talk to us. Hey, Bill, we're live now. I'm just so you know, we're flying. The machine is in the air.
Gotcha.
We're just doing a little bit of an intro on what you do and everything else. And I was going to ask Brad. Brad's he's an expert in AI and very, very skilled academically, professionally in computer science. And so I was going to ask Brad about our buddy George, who's passed on, but you and George were working on a project and you saw links between what Bill has created and what George and you were talking about.
Bill, I just saw this, so I am spitballing on your product right now.
Okay.
But Pete pointed me to Cyber Scout. And my immediate thought was, after seeing this and kind of seeing your terrain layouts and whatever else, have you got like simulators for deer hunting?
So we have what we've done is we've trained other neural networks, and one of them that is available inside of the app is kind of like a movement prediction that we trained that model using collared GPS data from academic and statewide studies. So the training data, or the truth data, is maybe another moniker that people might know about better, is that collared GPS data. So our model, that model in particular, not the one you're talking about, Cyber Scout, that model is informed by that collared deer data. And then we have other models we're developing right now using, we just had a team up in Ontario and in North Dakota putting radio GPS collars on ducks, like backpacks.
Oh,
so that model will be based on that data. And that's like the most like bias independent data that we could come up with to do like animal movement prediction. On the large language model that you just talked about, that is a, OpenAI used to, they don't anymore, but they used to put out engines that you could use to train your own neural networks, your own data. And so what we did was we took one of those networks and then introduced our own reference data, or what would you call it? Our own layer of truth data on top of that the model references firstly before making a more generalized answer that might be based on all of the training data that someone like OpenAI or X or one of these other companies that are putting out their models would use. So we actually started building that one ourselves inside of MATLAB. And then once these models started getting put out, we kind of mixed and used the best parts of those, and then used our own retrieval documents, which I think at this point we have about 200,000 retrieval documents that we stack on top of that data as like a first point of reference. So when you go in there, you get your own kind of experience that's guided or leans towards the outdoors in those pursuits.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. And then the experience for the hunter is they can kind of see that terrain beforehand. They can see where the animals are. They can, learn when to expect them, those kinds of things. That's amazing.
Yep. Yeah. And then we're coming out with some other ones here pretty soon. Actually, next week, we'll drop a model that does terrain analysis using stuff like solar flux, paths of least resistance, or, straight line analysis. And then after that, we are using some stuff, I call them state machines, but other people call them like agents that we are modeling on top of that will use all of the AIs to do a more comprehensive analysis to aid hunters when it comes hunters and other pursuits, other places that we're building products for, that will aid them in kind of like a multimodal variable analysis to do, learning and research on these types of things.
Yeah, neat.
Very good. Well, it's nice to meet you guys.
Yeah, good to meet you.
Yeah, yeah, great to meet you. We got kind of running fast there as we were all trying to get our technology to behave, and so Brad and I just got rolling. But I think it's cool. So let's go back into the genesis of the idea. I'm sure you've talked about this 100 times, but let's just spend a few minutes because look, combat guys. I'm a combat guy. We have a lot of times, at times, to just sit there and occupy our minds with something, anything, and there's a lot of brilliance in those moments. A lot of inventions, I would submit, come out of waiting for a helicopter or whatever it's going to be that we do when. So for the people that don't know, when you are waiting for a movement via air in the helicopter, you go out to the flight line and you wait. The helicopter's supposed to show up at 12:15, but it might not show up to 7:15. And so you just have to sort of just stay out there indefinitely because you cannot miss that helicopter. If you do, someone is going to start bugging people above you. So when I say that, there's a lot of times where even though you're frantically busy and you're working hard nonstop, there's a lot of time for lulling. And some of my best ideas have come post-workout in a nap or a shower or whatever because my brain slows down long enough and it just spits out brilliance all the time. Do you find the same thing?
Yeah. So I mean, one of the other ways to say what you talked about before there was the military's got this mantra of kind of like hurry up and wait.
Yeah.
So get to where you need to be on time, and it doesn't matter if we're late. What matters is if you're on time. So yeah, definitely sitting around waiting for things to happen is definitely, I would say that accurately describes the military experience overall. Like you go to combat or you deploy overseas, Iraq, Afghanistan, Africa, Philippines. And you get there and you're like, now it's just waiting around for an operation to happen. Or, I think they could be best characterized by 5% of the time you're doing what you thought you'd be doing the whole time you're deployed. So definitely during those times, for me, actually, the idea for Spartan Forge and this kind of comprehensive target automation for hunters came to me while sitting on the side of a mountain in Iraq, doing a signals intelligence collection mission, where my part in a combatant commander's targeting cycle was the intelligence collection and then dissemination, processing and dissemination of that intelligence framework. And while I was up there, what occurred to me was hunters and soldiers have a targeting issue that they're trying to solve. And that comes from doing that variable analysis that I talked about before. So it kind of struck me that a lot of the work that I was doing would aid a hunter in their pursuit, even though they don't know they're participating in a targeting cycle, they are. And then what the military has done really well, through this find, fix, finish mantra that kind of, came out in the early, I'd say 2005 or so, was kind of giving academic rigor to how we prosecute the enemies of the U.S. in a combat environment. And so what I did with Spartan Forge was abstracted that targeting cycle and then grafted it onto what hunters are trying to do. And so Spartan Forge, if I were to describe it quickly, I would say is the implementation of that abstracted targeting cycle.
Brad, what are your thoughts on all that?
Well, I have, that is so cool. And the first thing I could think is how cool would it be if you could put collars on the enemy?
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
Yeah. These are a little easier enemy, that's for sure.
Yeah. And we kind of did that type of stuff, whether it's ISR.
I don't doubt it. I mean,
yeah.
Find them once and then track them a little bit, keep track of where they are and, start knowing where they are. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then there's, you're always trying to get to the most concrete version of training data that you want to give to an artificial intelligence to kind of abstract those patterns out and make them predictable, and then use what we know, how we evaluate something like our neural networks, whether you're training a recurrent neural network or an LSTM or something, is how well does it perform in a recall scenario where you're trying to gauge whether or not it's predicting accurately. In Iraq, Afghanistan, the Philippines, or even in Mexico, there are, what we would call indicators and warnings, where we've kind of taken a what would you say, a non-artificial intelligence look at, when these types of things start to announce themselves, then they're indicators of something else that could be on the horizon. And so with these with the same types of neural networks I was building while I was in the military, or, processing the data that was on externals, and then performing those indicators and warnings, or doing analysis of those indicators and warnings, and then saying, the stage is kind of set for something else to be happening here. And then the question became, how do we automate these things and automate the ingestion of these indications and warnings, and then provide something to a commander to make a more informed analysis and determination of what might be happening on the battlefield and how do we affect it in the best way possible. That was kind of my challenge for the last 10 years of my career.
So that's kind of the runtime of it. How about the practice time? I mean, now that you have these, these patterns and whatever, can you have these systems generate, sort of fake sets of data that you could then, users could then use to practice? I mean, fake indicators, those kinds of things.
So on the movement prediction portion, I don't do as much randomly generated data for training purposes, or at least we don't now, because I have such a volume of data that I haven't even trained with. Gotcha. That I haven't reached that step. But I will say on the stuff we're doing with images, which I'm hoping to come out with next year, we are able to take images, flip them, change them, especially with the advent of things, in the image galleries and what we can produce reliably. You can use those types of data, and we do use those data to train these networks, because an AI right now has a pretty good idea of what a whitetail deer or an elk looks like. So you can, flip, rotate, move, take sections of those data, and then generate one-offs of those data. Of course, you want to curate them and make sure that you're not getting too far away from what is reality, but they certainly can aid us in generating larger training packages to increase the veracity of the model, for sure.
So do you, I guess your customer right now is actually like real hunters. Is that a good, okay. Do you envision, say, branching off into like maybe video game space?
So we use video game engines. We're actually generating some pretty cool maps that we're building, where we are using video game engines to render or do the raster of these environments, where we're using actual data of the Earth's surface, but then we're trying to present it in a more palatable way, where a user can, through something that's aesthetically pleasing to look at, still derive a ton of data to aid in their analysis. I'd say that's the way we're doing it right now, and we'll be dropping those maps actually here pretty soon. But then the second way, and I think that's more prescient to your question, is we will be using the application itself, even because the domain where we're doing this analysis is the surface of the Earth, and because there are so many things that aren't at first blush apparent to a hunter that will inform how a deer might choose to navigate an area or to bed or to do all of these things, the data ends up becoming useful in the way that we've packaged it and presented it to people that aren't in that space. One point of contact for that is we've got people out in North Carolina right now who are doing flood recovery efforts that are using the app, and one of our layers in there called the LiDAR layer, and then another layer, which is our UAV layer, which is it's like 5 to 15 centimeter map imagery that's got historical imagery every 6 months. So what they're able to do, what they're doing with that right now on the ground, some of my friends, in fact, where you have a scenario where there's a couple that are living on a mountainside somewhere west of Boone, North Carolina. Their road has been washed away. They haven't had water or food for a few days. and one of the guys had told me a story where he used the LiDAR layer to identify a logging trail. So LiDAR is light detection and ranging, like a radar, and it maps the Earth's surface. And what it does is it makes things like old logging trails pop out, where you wouldn't be able to see that on a standard relief map or like a 1 to 50,000 map. And so, they are getting up to these people's places and providing them relief and food and water using that LiDAR layer and that historical imagery layer. Although we built that and provisioned it for hunters, it's being used in separate domains. So we do definitely, using the technologies that we're talking about, we see that there's a transfer where people are using it in places that we didn't initially expect, but we're nonetheless very happy about it. We've given away a few hundred accounts to people who are out there doing flood relief efforts. And we really relish the opportunity to aid something like that. So it's for us has been a boon.
Is there an application for people who are dirt bike riding and out in the deserts, doing just because I live in California down here, and there's a lot of folks that go out to a lot of different desert spots, and the trails and everything, but it seems like there's an application there.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, the analysis and the different ways that we're trying to present the data on the ground would certainly aid someone. We've got this LiDAR map that I talked about. You can pop it into like a 3D view. And then you can turn on something called like slope angle, which tells you the degrees of undulation in the Earth's surface. So that would be probably hugely beneficial to like a dirt bike rider. And we do have a plan to kind of branch into some of these other places where we've already developed the technology and there's an easy win in different domains. It's definitely something that we plan on getting into more.
Is there a Blue Force tracker type element where if there's two of your apps in the area, you'll pop up?
Well, so right now there's not live data sharing. That actually comes out in December. Blue Force Tracker, as it's instantiated right now, is if the three of us all have the Spartan Forge app, I can draw a geofence on the Earth's surface. I can add your guys' emails to it. And then any pins or like waypoints, I guess would be another word to use, that get dropped on the ground, get automatically shared between the three people that are part of that team inside of that geofence. And then you automatically share notes and photos from inside of there. So that's also being used out in North Carolina right now to, as people are relieving and coming in and out, they're able to pass on the ownership of these Blue Force teams, and then they can see where water donation points are, where roads are being washed out, where there are houses that don't have access. And then that kind of creates that data continuity so that when new people are coming in, they're able to pass on that information quickly, but also share it amongst the team when they're all on the ground. And then in December, maybe January, we will drop the live location share and a chat function. So in the same vein as like a Life 360, once you are on that team and people are in the geometry, as long as they have service, they'll be live sharing their location. You'll live share the battery level and the amount of service that the people have. And the initial build for that was, you're hunting with a grandfather or a young kid, or you just have a large group of people that are going to be in a space doing a hunt. There's an obvious safety.
Yeah. Dick Cheney wishes he had that.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Yeah. So there's that safety nexus there, and kind of battle space deconfliction.
Wow. We were using the term Blue Force Tracker. Just so everybody know, Blue Force Tracker lets you know what the vehicles are in the area. So if there's 15 different military units out there, and there's among those, there's 4 units in each, or 4 vehicles each unit, you can actually look and see where they're moving at, whether it's airplanes or vehicles. You also there's a thing called Merc Chat where you can chat between entities. So if I'm walking in a valley, I'm gonna try to do Bill's job here. If I'm walking in a valley and I make a right turn to go up into the draw where you're at, you can be like, boop, hey, you're downrange of me, or whatever, oh, that's Bob, right? And then I guess also if you went and saw a farmer and you wanted to go quail hunt, he could already have his markers and he could bring you into his universe. And he could say, there's a thicket here, there's a thicket there. Don't go to this thicket back, whatever, right?
Yep, exactly.
Is that right?
Yeah, and that's exactly the kind of thing that we are doing with this, and that's one of the useful applications. And although we don't call it Merc Chat, I used to do Merc Chat, and that same type of kind of foundational capability is available for the Blue Force Tracker.
Yeah,
Yeah.
our
You know,
comment.
I never.
Sorry, Pete.
I was going to say one thing, Brad, then I'll shut up. I never once sent a single Merc chat message ever because that was never my job. I was always a guy getting out of a vehicle and going somewhere else, you know? So all the experience I've had, I've never actually, I only know the words Merc chat. I don't know anything about that program. It's amazing to like how compartmentalized we all can be in a combat zone where like that's pizza dismount. He doesn't need to worry about Merc chat. He needs to go out and do his thing, you know? And so, yes, I've heard those words. Never put my hands in any of those Blue Force tracker units. Seen them, but never touched them.
Yep. Yeah. So that Merc chat, if I recall correctly, that was the multifunctioning route code chat that was associated with BFT. I used that while I was in the military. There's a couple of other channels that they use as well, but it was super helpful for us when we were down there.
For sure. Sorry, Brad. We were just talking about some
that's totally okay. Our good friend and commenter Dan White had to ditch for a meeting, but this will be interesting to him, I promise. So when you're listening later, Dan, I hope you like the answers to this or the questions even. How does your system, Bill, compare to systems that, say, government emergency response at federal, state, and local level use? And how do you see your system, say, compared to what military actually uses right now, just in terms of functionality, capability, flexibility, as you've seen, certainly with the North Carolina stuff?
I would say that, I mean, not to sound flippant, but the first thing I would say is we did it for much cheaper.
Okay.
That would be the first thing, I advised on government contracts for a 2-star general and a colonel. Before I left the military, I was a chief warrant officer, and I was just having a conversation with a guy the other day about this. And when I looked at our guidance and our task organization and the things that we wanted to achieve and build, this would have been a $15 to $70 million program in the government, and we've done it for orders of magnitude less than that.
So a little aside there, you said you're a chief warrant officer, so those not available with the whole command structure and whatever else. That's an enlisted person.
Well, they were enlisted, and then you become a warranted officer. So you've done stuff that's warranted. You are becoming an officer. Right. So they call it a warrant officer. So you are commissioned.
I got it. Okay.
And you are a chief warrant officer, but the distinction would be, I draw parallels between a school and the military in that your soldiers, your lower enlisted guys, E1s through E4s, I got up to E6. Your E1s through your E4s would be like your students. So like your privates, those are the people that everything's built around. The school exists for the privates. And then you have your non-commissioned officers, which are like your leaders of men. And they're the ones that are responsible for the day-to-day training, manning, and equipping of those students, those soldiers. Those would be your teachers. And from there, you have officers, your colonels, captains, general officers. Those would be your administrators and your school board.
This is my point. This is my point here, which is your majors, your colonels, your generals aren't going out and starting companies doing this.
Yeah,
they're sitting on $70 million budgets trying to figure out something to do, and you come along, you see the essentials, and you've gone out and you started a company that does it. That's really amazing.
Cool. Thank you. I appreciate that. And to the warrant officers in that same nexus that I was talking about before, those would be more like the technicians. So those would be the people who are coming up with like the curricula, what's going to be taught, what desks are we going to use? Are we doing chalkboards this year? Or are we upgrading the digital stuff? What displays? What actually needs to be taught? How are we going to suit different learning levels? What tools, what equipment are we going to use to necessitate that? So those would be very hands-off people. Those would be like your school board or school board advisors.
You don't come in as a chief warrant officer, though. You come in as enlisted, and then you work your way up.
I came in as like a student. I was an enlisted guy at True Blue E1. I went all the way up to E6. E6 is like a staff sergeant, so you're like a teacher, like a teacher at that point. And it just was obvious to me that I'm not a great leader. Like there are great non-commissioned officers who can, fill the role and really lead and inspire people. And it was obvious to me that I'm more of a technician. So that's the reason why I went that route. And just like that, that same nexus, or that same example, that analog that I drew with a school, the students should expect to see the teachers every day. They should be expected to be impacted by what's happening in the head office with the principals and the vice principal and the administrators, but they see them less. And then hardly ever do you interact with the school board. But and that's kind of what the military is in that same regard. As a warrant officer, warrant officers to me, especially when I was a young troop, I hardly ever saw, and when I saw them, it was like, who's that guy? What's he doing here? He's got weird rank on his chest. I don't know what that is.
And he's drinking coffee and has a bad attitude.
Yeah, exactly. So that was kind of and it was the best decision I ever made, was becoming a warrant officer. It was truly a blessing, and I enjoyed it. And I won't get political, but I mean, up until the end of my career, I thought I'd be in for 35 or 40 years. I thought they'd have to kick me out by the time. If you would have asked me at my 16 or 17 year mark, I would have said, I'm going to do this till I die. Things changed, the political landscape, and I guess the simplest way of putting it was, I really excelled in wartime. That was really where I proved my mettle, and building capability and capacity and training people to conduct combat operations as intelligence professionals was really where I excelled. And as I saw the war kind of dwindling down, there was a tolerance for guys like me during war, as long as we were successful in that. I kind of say what's on my mind. I have some attention deficit disorder. I am full of energy. I hardly ever sleep. I'm always thinking about the next thing. I'm very passionate about the job. And so they would put up with me using colorful language, or speaking my mind. And they'd be like, well, that's just Chief. Don't worry about Chief. He's heading off for his, 7th or 8th deployment, and he won't be a problem anymore. And as long as he keeps helping us kill bad guys more better, we're going to put up with it. As the war started to kind of dwindle down, and the politics changed, there was less of an appetite for people like me. And it just became obvious to me that it was probably my time to exit stage left.
Yeah, don't sell your leadership short. You're more of an introverted leader, but don't sell your path short. That's all. This is.
I'm certainly an introvert.
Yeah.
When Bill and I were in the military, there was a couple of eras in there, right? And I don't know what Bill's years are, but I can hear what he was talking about. And we had the zero defect military, and then we started going to war. And dudes like Bill and I became valuable because I never became a warrant officer. I just stayed in the field doing my job, and I just got better and better and better at it. And really, when you look at the warrant officers, they're trying to help improve the next generation. They're looking ahead, and they're working on that technical capacity. They're invaluable, and it makes complete sense that a dude who's like, I'd rather be hunting, but I'm hunting humans right now with SIGINT. I got Pete over there trying to get a guy's phone number or picture, that kind of thing. We're all working in the same world. It makes sense that you would come up with something like this. How many people work in this operation? Because it seems like it has to be lean. If you're doing an orders of magnitude below $70 million, right? Because those contracts, by the way, when you get that $70 million contract machine and you open it up, you're like, for fuck's sake. It's the first thing you say.
Yeah. Well, we started with 3 people. I started and did maybe about the first 2 years on my own. And at that point, it was kind of like a learning phase where I was trying to figure out exactly what I was trying to build, because in the military, I was involved in software and hardware. And I kind of started in the hardware route because I found as I was pitching potential investors that software and AI was more of an abstraction, and people weren't really even talking about AI in 2014, at least in the way that I was. So it was more nebulous to people. So what I started off doing and pitching people on was maybe some of the more hardware stuff that I wanted to build, which really I haven't even built yet. I haven't gotten there, mostly because the margins are much better in software and I can scale and grow a lot more. So, but then as I started to develop this thing and learn and kind of understood what the things were that would interest a venture capitalist or a angel investor or someone like that, the scales of software and really where my strength was there. And so I started myself, and then I advised in an office in the military called DARPA for 2 years, which does black box stuff for the DoD. Their mandate is kind of to build crazy stuff, and then the charge of the military and the broader community is to peel off maybe. So imagine for your listeners, if you guys know what DARPA is, then I'm speaking to the choir, but if your listeners don't, you could think of it as DARPA, and this isn't exactly how it works, but it's a rough abstraction that will serve for my purposes. We're going to build a rocket that can land on its ass, like Elon Musk has done. And then they say, well, what do we need for this rocket? So they start building things, and then they get an approval and they get a program. And they might get to 70% of the way of building this rocket that can do what they need it to do. But then the program is expired and you're out of money now, and it's time to move on to the next thing. Well, it's the charge of the military and the greater government to look at this rocket and say, well, they designed this Teflon tile that cuts down on drag. So we're going to use this tile, and we're going to go give it to the guys who are building MRAPs or LMTVs. And this tile is extremely light and durable. And now they're going to use it to deflect, roadside bombs. Something like that would be the charge. That's not something that's happened. It's a hypothetical, but that's the charge of DARPA. So while I was in there, I met some other guys that were kind of similarly minded as me. And I kind of pitched them on this idea of what I was building, and we just started doing it in our off time. We're right now, I would say we're at about 17 employees. Our major, our competition, I would say that doesn't even fill out the HR department. Most of our competition is probably somewhere between 100 and 300 employees, and we're just at about 17. So like in this rubric, I'm the CEO, but I'm also doing the presidential functions. I'm doing the chief marketing officer functions. I'm still the product owner and doing development, whereas my COO is the CFO as well, and he's also writing back-end code. So we're all wearing many hats and working many hours. It's a short day for me right now is 12 or 13 hours.
Half day.
Come on,
That's what they call you at the 82nd Airborne. Half day. 12 hours. That's a half day.
cut out your meals, man. There's another 2 hours in there. Come on.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't even eat during the day. My first meal is not usually till 2 or 4 p.m. So.
Wow.
So Pete, let me put my fake AI expert hat on here, and let me just kind of respond to a couple things that Bill said. One is that he started this in 2014, and he started it with thinking about AI things like machine learning and huge data sets and the like, and that is OG. That is you see these job postings for jobs where you've got 10 years of machine learning, and everybody knows there's like 3 people that have 10 years of machine learning, and we're talking to one of them right now, Pete, who kind of went on his own and did a business this way, which is absolutely crazy. But he's doing AI the right way. It's all the stuff we're reacting to. Every time we talk, Pete, is a lot of newcomers who saw ChatGPT. They thought, hey, well, it's going to replace everybody's job. We're going to wrap something around it. We're going to get $1 million of investment. We're going to be a unicorn in that's $1 billion company in 2 weeks or whatever else. We're going to hire the best talent, but then we're going to fire them because they're going to be replaced by AI programmers. A lot of pretenders. And what we're talking to right now, Pete, is somebody who didn't pretend much. He kind of scraped to get here, and he's got a really interesting product. One of the things, we referred to our friend George before. George passed away last month. He was really involved in emergency management. We are too. And one of the, he's sort of a new friend for me, a longtime friend for Pete. But one of the things he showed me in the past few months was there's this public view of emergency management that they have these giant operation centers and huge screens, and everybody's sitting nicely with headsets that are, they all line up, and the chrome reflects and patterns and the whole thing. It's this, incredibly mechanized, organized situation. And that's the picture. So if you had AI, draw me a picture of an ops center, it's going to be, like it's out of a Tom Clancy movie. And then a good ops center in a Tom Clancy movie, right? And in real life, it's like three guys sitting in a hut, with wires, almost strangling them if they stand up wrong, trying to make things happen in real time that can't possibly happen in real time, and yet they make it work. And I think one of the cool things that you have with this, and certainly the people in North Carolina that are using this, and rescue and recovery efforts, that kind of thing, that they're discovering is, we're not that far from that vision, but it's not the planners that are going to bring us that vision. It's the people who are scraping and putting it together that are going to bring us that vision, and that's what I think is really, really cool about this and what you've done.
Yeah, I think necessity is the mother of invention. Mm-hmm. So like when you really determine that you need something, or that, for me, it was determining that there was really a sector in the market for this, because, the way I grew up, the home I grew up in, is a single mother home, not a lot of money, but the culture of hunting was there. And as I've gotten older, with things like inflation and government spending and stuff, our availability and our money and our time, our resources, objectively over the past few years have gotten smaller. So our time to enjoy, leisure pursuits like hunting, which, it's become for some people it's a leisure pursuit. For some people it's a way of life. My freezer is mostly full of venison because I still hunt, whenever I can. People's time to do that and enjoy those things has dwindled. And so my overall goal, like right now, I've got Spartan Forge. I've got one other company that I work in. I'm mostly advising and helping and networking. And I've got two other companies that I'm starting. My goal with them has always been to increase individual autonomy. So at the level of analysis of the individual, how do I make them more capable without breaking the bank, but allowing them to do things that are important to them, understanding this situation we find ourselves in, where leisure pursuits are becoming less and less because people have to work more and more, because what people don't understand with something like inflation is you're being taxed, but there's just no bill associated with it. So in other words, if you've got $10,000 in the bank, and the bank goes and prints $1 trillion every 90 days, like we're doing right now, that 10,000 doesn't have the buying power it did 2 cycles ago. So now you've got a situation where people have less money and they need to work more, so they have less time. But this culture of hunting is still important to them. So how can I act as a check to that system, bolster individual autonomy by creating a product that fits multiple levels of analysis, where if someone just wants to drop pins and walk to pins, they can use my product to do that, and they can do it cheaper than they can with my competitors. Or if they want to go down the multiple rabbit trails of the things that we're talking about and use our large language model to learn how to do a brain tan deer hide, and they want to make their wife a purse out of it, my app can show them how to do that. If they want to do different cuts of meat, or how they package the meat and vacuum seal it, my program can help them do that. If they, what kind of freezer should I have? I'm on a budget of $500 for the whole year. How do I get a hunt out of that? And where do I find public land in order to go and do that? And these deer are harder to kill on public land. So how do I do that variable analysis and kind of walk them through that? And the guys, or the orienting, the star for everything that I'm doing is, how do I increase that autonomy of the individual, and scale it in a way where people are less reliant, but still getting to do the things that they enjoy. And that for me is kind of that's in every capacity in my life. It's how do I use truth and technology to enable the individual in a way where they're not reliant, because with the application, it might sound counterintuitive, because they're like, well, you're building an app they have to use. And it's like, no, because you can use that app to learn how to direct or read an old map, or use a Lensac or azimuth or a compass to shoot an azimuth. You can learn how to brain tan a deer. And my hope is that after 4 or 5 years of using the app, you don't need it anymore. But then when other people see you doing these things and they're like, hey, I want to do that as well, they can be like, well, go use this app, Spartan Forge. That's what I used. And it helps you along. And then you find yourself in a place where you're being capable for yourself and your family in a way that's not relying on anyone else but your own time and your own diligence and your own motivation. So to me, if I keep doing things that way, it seems to me that the world, in the final analysis, appreciates those types of endeavors, and it ultimately pays off for everyone.
So I think there's another thing you can do too, is you can bring new people in. You can make it more accessible for new people who just want to know the space. My own experience, by the way, I look at your background and you got a bow in the background. That's badass. I mean, if that doesn't like, as you're telling that story about how I want to empower the individual and not like attach the training wheels permanently and, weigh them down in this technology that they wouldn't know what to do if they didn't have. And you've got a bow in the back, like, forget I guess you said you're your chief marketing officer or whatever else. Forget that guy. Fire that guy.
Yeah.
Like, just take that clip with the bow in the background, stick an arrow. Hey, there's a bow in the background. This is how we used to kill deer before we had, inexpensive firearms, right? I mean, yeah, that's a great message. It's funny because the way the tech industry is today, it's all about how can we replace this human being? How can we automate and get rid of him? And of course, what that does is that stirs up, from the people who understand process and understand, hey, you can't take humans out of these processes; they won't work. Of course, it gets us up here. For people who are part of those processes, it hurts them here in their hearts.
Yes, sure.
Because they're like, oh, you're not valuable anymore. The computer can do it. And oh, by the way, that's a lie that they're telling you too.
Right.
It's not even true.
Yes.
But I think your approach to this is also something that people who want to bring tech to things can learn as well, which is, let's bring assistive tech, absolutely, but let's bring assistive tech to make individuals better at what they do, more capable of doing things on their own, that kind of thing. Let's introduce them to new things that they might not otherwise want to learn. I picked up music 7 years ago. The most musical thing I'd ever done was play my CD player at 11. Like that was it. And I learned to play guitar, and I became kind of good at it. And or at least at what I do. Pete says I'm awful. It's all right. He's kind of good at it too. But there's certainly for that, all the technology and all the websites and all the YouTube videos and whatever else, it's ridiculously confusing. Yeah. You have to sort out, okay, what's a good thing to learn? What's a good thing to do? What's good technology to buy? And it sounds like what you've created is, sort of the self-contained system that someone could show up at your door and you can give them something to do to learn, to be a hunter. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. And I mean, I also like to pick up a tailor every once in a while and pluck around, although I find myself with less and less time to do it. You wouldn't be a military guy if you weren't trying to swoon a woman with a guitar at fire somewhere.
It's true.
I think that you wouldn't be a guy if you weren't trying to swoon a woman with a guitar, but it's all right. I don't think the military has the monopoly on that. But
speaking of a guy that swooned women with a guitar, I believe this bow behind me is signed by Ted Nugent. I went and did a hunt with him. I went and did a hunt with him last year, and I actually killed that sheep.
Wow.
While I was on a hunt with him last year. And so under what you just said before about, people have different ways of learning, whether it's reading or visually or actually having to get out into the field and experience it, or actually picking up the guitar. You can only watch, as you said, so many YouTube videos. So if you create as many vectors as you can for people to get to an end state that is desirable for them, then the more robust the product is, and it allows them to, engage on that. Because, I'll have people reach out to me or talk to me about the app or say, well, I can do some of the mapping stuff like on Google Maps, or I can do this on, X, Y, or Z. And I'm like, yeah, you can do 20, 15% on Google Maps, but understand that when you're using something like Google Maps, you're the product. Google Maps is not the product. You are the product, because everything that you Google and look up and everything that you look into gets stored in a database, packaged, associated with your persona, and then sold to a marketing firm so that they can serve you ads, because, so-and-so looks up barbecue joints every Saturday night. Now, all of a sudden, you're getting advertisements on your phone about barbecuing joints. Not saying that there's anything wrong with that. All I'm saying is you should enter into that association knowing that you are the product, and that your data, your interests, your things are being sold Whereas on the opposite end, my product is my product. And if the product is done and oriented correctly, it will self-propagate by its own accord, not because I've done something that wasn't obvious to you. You know, my father-in-law or my stepfather, when they use Google Maps, have no concept that it's actually they are the ones that are being harvested here, and that this app is, in a very vampiric way, packaging them as the product, and then they are being sold to someone else. I'm not saying that there's malevolence inherent in that. What I'm saying is it's an arrangement that most people don't understand. And I think if I told this product from the beginning, and my stated arrangement is the arrangement, and that I use the metric and the guiding light of truth to do that, and that in the final analysis, it's ultimately better for everyone involved.
I want to ask, when you're talking to that retired Green Beret, maybe even a chief, just like you, and they live in Colorado Springs, they love hunting, you know, they're like, iron sights, hatchet, map, good, you know. So, because like even when I shoot, I don't need a scope. Look, in most cases, I don't need a scope. Can I just line up these sights and then I'm going to hit the target? So, what do you say to someone like that, who you're like, yeah, I get it, because you're a hunter. I'm not a hunter, right? I can shoot, but that's not my thing. So I would instantly go, I don't need all that technology. I'm going out to get away from technology.
Yes, yeah, for sure. So, I mean, there's a broader answer that I usually default to first, which is there's balance in life, and that we should strive to be balanced in every domain that we find ourselves in. So you can think about this with iron sights on a rifle. In fact, I hunt with a primitive bow. So when I'm using this app, I still use a primitive. I used a primitive bow until a couple of years ago. I don't use my primitive bow as much anymore. I actually missed on a really large animal, and it haunts me to this day. So I've picked up I've picked up the compound bow, and I still like bow hunting, but the compound bow now, you know, this animal, long story short, jumped off to about 40 yards right after I shot it with my primitive bow that I made from Osage, and looked around and didn't know what happened for about 40 minutes. And with a compound bow, I could have taken 10 more shots in that time. But with the primitive bow in my hand, my effective range is only about 17 to 20 yards, depending on the situation. So I picked up the compound bow after that. But the point I'm trying to get to is, as men and women, but I'll speak as a man because that's what I am, we should strive to have balance where if you're a child learning arithmetic, you should be able to pick up a pencil and do the arithmetic. But then at a point in your life, once you've gotten good at arithmetic, you should pick up the calculator and start learning linear algebra. And then when you have that balance where you are grounded in the past with an eye on the future, you're a more complete individual. Just in that I can pick up an M16A1 with iron sights, and I can zero my rifle and I can shoot out to 300 yards on a point target, or an area target at 500 to 700 yards and be efficient. Or I can pick up that M4 carbine with a floating barrel, a SOP Mod 2 package, and an EOTech on the top, and I can prosecute targets just as efficiently. But now I've got a one-up on any enemy because I have this thermal package and night vision, and I can do all of these things that other people can't do. And that's how we owned the night as an army in 2010 to 2023, until we gave the Taliban a bunch of night optics by leaving them behind. But that balance is important in life. Just in that, I consider myself a person of science and a scientist and an engineer. At my core, that's what interests me and motivates me. But just like I think I heard you guys say, I picked up a guitar and started learning guitar. I got into poetry. I got into reading like really old books by great authors, and trying to effectively give myself that balance that I think every man should strive for, where you can gut a deer at 7 a.m., bring home venison for your wife, and you can do the tango with her in a black tuxedo tie at 11 p.m. and talk about Nietzsche. Like, that balance is something we should all strive for, where we can do the old and the new, and that the hero in so many stories is well developed in every capacity. So that's my 30,000 foot answer to that question. My 10,000 or 5,000 foot answer to that question would be, growing up in a single mother home where she made less than 10 grand a year, and my dream for Spartan Forge, and I hope it will come to fruition in some places, but in other places, getting a message from a 16-year-old kid who said, I live in a trailer with my mom in North Dakota, just like you did. She's working hard to make ends meet, and using your app there's a free version, using the free version of the app, or I got together $40 and paid for the full version of your app. I learned how to get some discount camo and a bow from 5 years ago. And I went out and I harvested a doe, and I put 50 pounds of venison in the freezer, and my mother cried herself to sleep that night. That to me is a noble incorporation of technology, where for that family, I want to push technological capacity to its limit in order to once again empower the individual and do something for someone, or help someone do something that's truly noble. And in that case, when people are hunting to eat, I want to give them as much ethical and legal capability as I can. So if that involves giving them some tools or allowing them to do some analysis of certain sites where they otherwise wouldn't be able to, and I've used that technological capacity to do that, that to me is a victory. So to that person, I would say, if you don't need the tech, don't use the tech. Just use the app for getting to a waypoint in the dark, and use your primitive bow, or use your iron sight rifle and achieve success. Or if you're this person that's hunting to eat and to live because you want fresh organic venison that hasn't been injected with steroids and ground up into a burger by a guy who can't pronounce the name that he's serving to at some restaurant in Abu Dhabi, do that too. But it's a paradox where we have today people, and I'm not saying this is this person you're talking about, but people will get on an iPhone and complain about capitalism, or they'll get on social networks and complain about technology. And it's like the paradox of complaining about technology on the widest distributed technological network that man has ever seen is a conflict of terms and interests that I can't even illustrate to you because you haven't taken a second to think about it. So, the long story short here is, for the people who don't have the time but want to push the culture of hunting forward, or want to place venison on the table, or want to ingratiate their children in this long and storied pastime, but don't have the time to do it, but still want to be successful, I'm here to give them every capability possible. Or for someone who wants to harvest a big, like a big trophy buck or something like that, and that's their interest, then I'm here to give them all of the technology that I can. For somebody who wants to stick to the old ways, I'm here for you as well if you get lost at 5:30 a.m. trying to navigate your way into a tree stand in the middle of nowhere. So that would be my, and I apologize, I have no short answers.
No,
but that's
a great answer
for that.
Yeah, it's a great answer because
Yes.
we know guys like that want to do it the old way and everything else, and there's plenty of space for that, right? And you're also saying you're of limited time, everything costs more money. Here's a way to do this and go knock that deer down and whatever, be safer, be more reliable, have more fun with your friends, whatever those things are. Yeah, I want to give Brad a chance to dig in here one more time before we wrap this up.
I want to, from your very, very long answer, I want to give you a word never to use, but it's exactly what is embodied in that answer. But don't ever use it because the word has been bastardized and it's gross at this point. But the word is alignment. And you hear a lot of AI people talk about alignment, and it's not wheel alignment. It's basically, hey, our stuff does politically correct things is really what it means to them.
Yeah.
But deeper, what it should mean is our stuff is in alignment with the human spirit. And that's what you're talking about there. And that's amazing. And I wish I could take honestly, next person who drops alignment on me, I'm dropping that clip. I'll make that clip after this show. I'm dropping that clip on him and just say, no, this is alignment. And he didn't even say the word. So there's that.
Very
Second thing I want to drop on you is there is an industry that is in complete disarray and just basically falling apart, all of its creative people right now, and that is the gaming industry. And they've basically lost it from their Hollywood sponsors. Their Hollywood sponsors are done with them. As we're talking, I'm thinking I would love a game where I could be the deer.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, with all of your data that you've got, you know, to find some way to, you know, bring, you know, talented companies or people or whatever in to look at ways to explore that data and let gamers and people in general like understand your world. You know, that gets to that teaching mission. I think would be an amazing thing.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be a lot of fun. I mean, I love the gaming industry. One of the things about gaming that I really appreciate is, you know, something that I didn't consider as much in the beginning, although I knew about it and I knew that it existed, but was like good UI and UX. Like good, like how do I, you know, I was just doing employee counseling today with guys that work for me where I'm just trying to like, you know, kind of gauge where they are, where they're going, what's good, what's bad. And I always encourage people that work for me to read Hemingway. Hemingway, I'm actually friends with one of his grandsons, Pat. And whenever I do get to talk to him, I always talk to him about the economy of words that Hemingway was able to, you know, very dense. You read The Old Man and the Sea, and there's 15 stories that you can tell from that one story. And there's, in one sentence, you can learn 5 or 6 things. And when I think about UI, and the reason it might sound disintegrated or like it doesn't make any sense, but when I think about UI or UX, when I'm designing, because I'm the product owner, I do the design on our mobile apps. It's how do I maximize the amount of information output and minimize the amount of user input. In other words, we've got this little compass on our app. You can set up preset maps like in a radio on a car, preset radio stations. So you can set up a LiDAR map, you can set up a historical map, you can set up a 1 to 50,000 topo map. And then to get between those maps, you just swipe that little compass and it just changes and puts these different maps on your screen that you've set up. It might sound innocuous, but you know, hunters are always trying to look at things in different ways. And you know, the more efficient you can make UI and UX, and the more that you can increase that communication channel between the thumb and what you're seeing visually on the screen. People don't know it when they're using an app that's designed well, but you can pick up an app and say, this all makes sense immediately to me. I can navigate this. UI UX is very it's an art really, where you have to make everything relatable instantly and everything should make sense. The video game realm, I kind of take a page from that book and saying they've really perfected, you know, when you pick up or put a video game in, you need to be able to understand how to use it and run it and how the world works and the rules and everything. And if you can't do that in 2 or 3 minutes, then the video game doesn't succeed. Like if that's not obvious right away. And so the reason I say Hemingway and all of that is because the more dense we can make things and the simpler they are, they understand, but they give us more. Like I said, you get 5 ideas from a sentence of Hemingway. From the video game world, I really look at them and say, one of the good things I can distill from that is they're very efficient and they're very, there's a lot of thought put into how these things are designed and how people interact with them and what they get from them.
Their UIs are very discoverable is the word.
Yeah, exactly.
They're very discoverable. You don't have to know every feature of the UI, every swipe, every whatever, but you are invited to do those things. Just like you don't have to know every interpretation of every Hemingway sentence. You're invited to read it and reinterpret it and discover more and more. And that's absolutely beautiful that you say that it's an art, because there is such a trend to say UI and UX is a science. There are design guidelines. You will follow these guidelines, and everybody who does that ends up with garbage. It should be informed. It should be informed by science. It should be informed by tradition. But ultimately, it's this art of making this discoverable thing that's fun to interact with. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. You said it better than I could. Exactly.
I've been doing it for 40 years. 40 years ago,
Brad's an expert.
40 years ago, we used to talk about how if you just like one click, and then you'd like optimizing out one click from some flow, and so you would figure out, okay, that click took 10 seconds. Then you would think over 2 million years, and just today by removing that click, I saved 2 lives. Right? You do that kind of math. Like, it's crazy that you do it, but this is how UI designers used to think back then. We don't think that way so much anymore.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but that's interesting. Can you tell me more about the video game, your background in video games? I'd love to hear more.
So I don't have the background in video games. I have a background in, computer science. Maybe I don't look like I'm almost 54, but I am almost 54, and I've been doing, UI applications. I was doing UI applications when DARPA funded the internet to like do the ultimate callback on our conversation. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, you mean Al Gore?
Al Gore, exactly. That guy too, right. That's crazy.
Yeah. Hey, let's wrap this thing up. We could talk offline, which I'd love to do, but let's get everything going here. So, Brad, give us some closing thoughts, then we'll go to Bill, and then we'll bust out of here.
Wow, Pete invited me to this talk at 11:30. I had a chance to comb my hair and then look at Bill's website, and I was instantly instantly appreciative of him, and the conversation has helped a whole bunch, and that's a good dude over there in the right corner.
Well, I appreciate that.
Bill?
So Spartan Forge is just one of the things that we're doing. I think people probably have a good idea of where I'm going or what I'm trying to do with this Mad Hat project here. You can check us out at spartanforge.ai. We're on Instagram, and I take it as a personal point for as long as I can do it. I spend about 2 or 3 hours every morning. I'm usually up by about 5. The first thing I do is I have a coffee. I sit down on my computer. I look at the workout that I'm going to be doing in the morning, and then I take my pre-workout. And while I'm taking my pre-workout, I'm messaging everyone on Instagram who's asked us questions, had recommendations. I do all of the first point customer service because I think it's really important for me to have a pulse, a finger on the pulse of what people are saying. So as the product owner, I can inform the way that we're doing things. I think that's something I'll always do. So if people have questions about the app, things that they want to do, questions for me, they can interact with me on Instagram, on Facebook, ask questions, download the app. There's all kinds of stuff on YouTube. We are doing stuff for the flood relief efforts in North Carolina. There's some stuff on our Instagram if they want to donate to that. For people that do a donation of more than $50, I give them a free app for the year. They for $150, they get some one-on-one time with me where I'll help them do some scouting using our application. Every penny of that money goes to the flood relief efforts in North Carolina and what's happening over there, helping those families. I don't mean not one penny goes to me. We've created hundreds of accounts for this, and I just think it's, if I'm going to have a platform like this, I want to use it for ultimate good, and I think helping those people is an ultimate good. So check us out there, and questions about the app, hit me up, and I really appreciate you guys having me on today, and enjoy the discussion.
Yeah. All right. Stand by. I'll come right back to you guys. Everybody else, I'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you